he got 3 degrees from Yale. Is an MM in 2010, an MM in organ performance, an MM in choral conducting in 2012, and an MMA in choral conducting in 2013. And only 7 years ago, he graduated from Oberlin College in Organ Performance. So,
when did you do
ask
all
me
that?
questions.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I have students who are in a 120 class. I excuse them, I made a lot of them be a little late, but I think that we probably have to step up now. But yeah, anyways, questions? Yes, absolutely.
At the very beginning, you talked about the difference between being live and listening to music on speakers.
Yeah.
And I'm somewhat of an audiophile, and I read the audiophile literature,
Great.
talks
Yeah.
about the effect that audio players of various kinds, where the majority of people's experience of music now comes not from speakers, but from cheap headphones, cheap earbuds.
Right.
Not even audiophile.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, if you wander around campus today, you can see people wearing headphones, but they're not cheap.
Yes,
They're
absolutely.
they're high-end that produce very high-quality music. And again, this is sort of distantly related to space, but it's the same issue of where does the music reside?
I absolutely agree, and I'm happy to see those headphones come back. I was dismayed to see the sort of decline of the audiophile when we got the iPods coming out, because the high-quality interpretation of recording just helps musicians also. The quality of music has risen in classical era, in classical music because of the recording. You know, people have to get it right and things like that and sound good. But that's absolutely right. I have not delved much into speakers and recorded music directly, but you're absolutely right that it's the space in which you're listening to the music. So it's people want the best sound from their headphones. They want to exclude the outside world. You know, a little bit. Yeah. I'm not sure if I've addressed the underlying sort of thought there, but yeah.
It's just another direction of the idea of where you are when you take in the music.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was curious as to why the architecture is so different, in the cathedrals that they used to have, centuries ago, and even in the early 20th century here, like the music hall, the Masonic Temple, the acoustics are altogether different from when you go into the sound compared to what you get in a performing arts theater that's newly built. And I mean, what made the difference? I mean, I know construction costs are much higher. Everything is higher now in current dollars and constant dollars compared to what they were then. But I mean, why is that they can't build this performing arts theaters to give the same acoustic level of integrity that they had before with the older?
Absolutely, and again, this is slightly in the field of architecture and acoustics, but I'll answer from the musical side of things. There are still some spaces like that. The Cathedral of the Most Blessed Sacrament up on Woodward.
I know
They renovated it.
Well, that's an older building.
It's an older building that they renovated. If you're talking about entirely new constructions, it's very interesting. It's not necessarily valued as much anymore to create these sort of grand style buildings. I mean, I wasn't alive at this point, but when Penn Station was gutted and turned into this sort of dark thing, is a real loss, I think. I would say there's one thing I can answer musically for sure. The larger spaces like the cathedrals, especially in the Renaissance, these giant cathedrals, they're extremely conducive to choral music, and they don't need the rhythm of like we now have bands and orchestras and brass sections and things like that in our orchestras, and they need less reverberance. The cathedrals that have 8 seconds of reverb, you can't really even tell exactly what the choir's saying, it just sounds very good. That's very good for choirs, but for an orchestra, it would just kind of defeat the composer's intentions. And so I think performances these days are used to the lesser acoustic.
Oh, yeah. guess. Well, that's what they grown up with.
Yeah, yeah, it's
They're
people
kind of
don't,
conditioned, I guess.
yeah, they don't know what they're missing in some cases. It's, you know, we want this to be very dry. We don't want any reverb, because that's in, you know, pop music. It could just get really, you can't understand the words as much,
No.
for instance. So it's partially, it reflects the changing taste in music. Now, if the spaces were provided for that stuff, if they built more spaces, music would start to reflect it, I believe. You know, more music would be written. Yeah.
On that question, I gather from your presentation and some experience playing in marching bands and in churches, and in one very memorable case, a concerto for 100 trumpets and 4 percussion, where we were scattered all over the place.
Great.
There's an inverse relation with that use of space and precision. But there's
Absolutely.
different ways of tackling this. That you can have people playing at different times.
Yeah.
You can have a very simple harmonic and rhythmic
Absolutely.
music that even so with the Berlioz piece didn't quite work out together. Or you can just say, I'm not going to worry so much about precision. I'm going to write a piece where it is atonal, it is serialized. It's not. I'm not even trying to do that.
Yeah. This is a really interesting thing. I left it out at the last minute. That basically the space has affected the compositions, and it's composers have had to do all the things you just described. They've made the harmonies simpler. If they know that, like Gabrielli's harmonies are way simpler than people who came before him. He just goes chord, different chord. He waits a really long time, you know, compared to a lot of composers, and that's absolutely true. So now we have these video cameras and things like that. People can try to do it, but it's still there can be this thing. So another area of my research is how have composers been influenced by this in specific musical terms, and then B, what as we as performers can do to enhance the precision of everything. I mean, a marching band is actually really amazing because they're spread across 100 yards of the field sometimes.
Yes, but I've been in bands that tried to march in from each end zone.
Yeah,
Playing the same march with a guy in the middle doing this.
Yeah.
Annually they would try this, and it was an annual disaster.
Yeah.
But what's the matter? Everyone can see, well, yeah, but you've got that sound differential.
Yeah, we're coming up against here the difference between sound and light speeds, of course. And it's just very difficult to combat because musicians are so reliant on their ear. You know? Yeah.
Another line of approach might be where continuing what Eric was just saying, where it doesn't work. So chamber music in venues that are too large, which happens all too often.
Yeah.
Acoustic music the same way. We went to hear Arlo Guthrie on Monday night in Ann Arbor. It's the 50th anniversary of the song. So there was a concert, and what they did to compensate was the music was all mic'd, which is another form of distortion there because it was in a very large old movie house. But you think about chamber music and what it was written for, and then venues get larger and larger and larger, and
absolutely, yeah.
It loses the intended spatiality of it.
Yeah, the fact that it's called chamber music,
exactly.
It's very interesting. Miking is a problematic thing. When I arrived at my church position, the choir had been mic'd for years. And I got there and I said, I can hear this person singing really loudly, but like this one person all the time. I said, well, it's just a side effect of the miking. So, well, this defeats the point of the choir. You know, you can just hear the one person. So I got rid of the mics, and then the church complained. And so I moved the whole choir right next to the congregation and said, okay, this is fine. But you have to find those spatial solutions a lot of the time. And miking, I try to avoid that whenever possible, unless I'm doing something like musical theater or pop. You know, I've done a fair bit of, but the mics can just completely ruin all of your preparation because this one guy at the soundboard, well-meaning, to be,
yeah.
Yeah.
A few years ago, the DSO experimented with cameras and screens during a live performance.
In what way?
They focused on individual players.
Oh, interesting.
As part of the concert.
Yeah.
This was before the strike. And they tried to twice, I think, and my guess is that either the musicians or the audience, I suspect they spent too much time watching the screen.
Absolutely.
And didn't want to.
It's never come back. Nobody's ever mentioned
Yep.
it. I just remembered it when you were talking about. But Michigan Opera Theater uses cameras and screens has a camera on the conductor on the balcony for the singers.
Yes.
So they can see the conductor because the conductor is actually underneath their feet.
Right,
Because of
right.
the weird way that
Yeah.
theater is set up.
Yeah, what did they do before that? They just sort of rolled with it as best as they could, you know?
Yes.
And another thing technologically, which drives me crazy, I think it doesn't bother a lot of people, the delay is always a little bit with the screen and the actual time. It might be a millisecond, but that's enough, because that, instead of rhythm being, it's dun, dun, you know, it's just to throw you off. It's just, yeah. So the technology can harm more than it can hurt, in a lot, but it's very neat sometimes too.
Well, Mozart's musical joke played with that long before the technology.
Yes, yeah.
The Town Musicians, I think it's called.
Yeah, I forget the
It
piece,
has,
but
anyway, it has musicians a beat behind
yeah.
the young.
Absolutely.
It's a very silly piece. But it played with that idea that they weren't hearing, they weren't playing.
Mhm.